I think most people out there are already aware of some problems that SIG Sauer is facing with their SIG P320, or the PIG 320 as I like to call it. If you're not familiar with the issue, let's talk about it real quick. The issue is the gun is firing while being dropped. Not being dropped in any way that's normally tested. When they do drop testing, they test in very specific ways. The gun is totally safe, even for states like California, etc., when dropped in a normal manner. Now, one thing that most drop tests don't do is drop guns directly on the back of their slide, where the back corner of the slide and the grip frame hit at the same time. There's a reason they don't do that, and it's because it's hard to get a gun not to fail if you do that enough. So they don't really do that, and plus it's not very likely that a gun's going to ever hit that way. So even California doesn't worry about it. But if you do that with this gun, it's going off. And it won't do it with other guns. Mainly guns that have a safety on the trigger, because the trigger is the problem. So if you're wondering why it's actually firing, it's not because of something internal up here that's going wrong. Like back in 2009 when Glock was having that problem, it was because of replacement triggers that didn't have the safety, and there were some issues with the firing pin back in 2009 that were quickly taken care of. But this is a totally different issue. The reason this is firing is a basic, simple design flaw, one that I kind of pointed out a long time ago. And that is the fact that this gun was based on a double action hammer fired gun. And it wasn't really changed that much to make it a double action only striker fired gun. So when they made that changeover, they didn't do enough to make a difference between the two guns, because when this gun is being dropped, what is happening is inertia is causing this gun to fire. And no, I don't mean inertia, the heavy-set elderly black lady at your church that wears all the fancy hats. I'm talking about the scientific principle of inertia. What's happening is when this gun, gets in motion, when anybody is in motion, it takes an outside force to stop that motion. So it's kind of like, if a big fat transsexual hooker falls on you off their heels, it takes a certain amount of energy to stop them from falling. And the heavier they are, the more energy it takes. Like if a Taiwanese tranny hooker fell off their heels on you and they were much smaller, it's not going to take as much energy. And the problem is the triggers on the SIG P320s are heavy, just like they were back when this was a hammer-fired gun. So it's taking more force to stop them. The concrete is actually stopping the gun. That's enough force to stop the gun. The only thing stopping the trigger, because the trigger is still in motion when the gun stops, is the trigger mechanism itself. And because it's so light, and everybody wants light triggers nowadays, the inertia of the trigger, because of its weight, is able to overcome that mechanism and actually pull the trigger and fire the gun. So that can be fixed multiple different ways. You could make the trigger a little bit heavier. Most people don't want that. Or you could make the trigger itself lighter. And the reason we know that would work is because if you look at the SIG X5 P320s, they have a different trigger, and it's lighter. It's about 6% lighter, I do believe. Actually, the regular trigger is 6% heavier than the X5 trigger. In fact, if you look at the trigger itself from the standard SIG P320, it's a pretty hefty trigger. It's all metal, and it's a pretty big, heavy trigger. By contrast, if you look at the Apex trigger here, it's a little smaller, a little more streamlined, a little thinner. And this trigger is about 10 to 12% heavier than this. It's 6% heavier than the SIG X5 trigger. It's about 10% heavier than the Apex trigger. That little bit of difference in weight makes these triggers, and I'm assuming this would be the same case with these as it is with the X5 trigger since they're even lighter, these don't fire. The trigger mechanism is enough to stop the inertia of this weight of a trigger from moving, whereas it's not with this trigger weight. So the easy fix would be to replace the trigger. Now, I've already replaced the triggers on all mine, so I'm not worried about it. But I do want to point out that when I'm first asked about this and people are like, oh, I'm so worried about that, I'm like, well, it's bullshit. It's mostly bullshit. I'm not saying it's bullshit because it isn't happening, or I'm not saying it's bullshit because SIG shouldn't deal with it, because they should. What I'm saying is worrying about that is incredibly ridiculous. You're far more likely to have a failure from a gun that requires you to pull the trigger to disassemble the firearm. You're far more likely to have an issue during that process. You're also more likely with any gun to have a negligent discharge while holstering than you ever would from dropping it in that very specific way and having it fire. Even states like California, etc., know that that's so unlikely that they don't even test for it. And they know it's probable in guns that don't have a trigger safety, so it would disqualify most guns anyway. Believe me, some people would love to test for that, but they get held back by saying that's too extreme. So you can, like I said, you can solve this problem easily by changing the trigger. But worrying about it, like I said, is kind of crazy. It's kind of like getting in a fist fight with a grizzly bear and having your big concern the whole time be that that chipmunk might steal your wallet while you're distracted. You're worrying about something that you really shouldn't be worrying about. There's other things to worry about that are far more pressing. But still, that doesn't mean I don't think SIG Sauer should take care of the problem, because I think this is a big fail on SIG Sauer's part. Not entirely a fail, because at first they denied it. And when they denied it, that was a fail. That irritated me. And this video was going to be very negative about SIG Sauer. But right before I filmed this video, I get an email from SIG saying, hey, we're fixing the problem for everyone. Monday, we will have all the information on our website how to fix it. And I'm betting they're just going to give you a lighter trigger, which they should have changed the trigger when they switched this gun from a hammer-fired gun to a striker-fired gun. But they didn't. So they're going to fix it. So I'm going to say, okay, kudos to SIG for fixing it. And I'm pretty sure it's probably just going to be a lighter trigger, but it could be something different. They might make the trigger heavier, but I don't think so, because they say it's going to be an easy fix. So I'm betting you're just going to have to replace your trigger with something like the Apex trigger or the X5 trigger, and problem will be solved. But the real moral of this story, the real issue here I think we're dealing with, and like I said, at first I was just going to make this video to slam SIG. A lot of people would be surprised because they're like, well, you love SIG, so you're probably just going to ignore this issue. Well, no, I wouldn't ignore an issue with a gun, because I think guns are dangerous weapons. So if there's an issue with one, we have kind of almost a responsibility to tell people. And I have no brand loyalty to any gun. I didn't make this motherfucker. I don't care if something's wrong with it. If something's wrong with it, I'll be like, this is a piece of crap. Like I say, didn't make it. Don't care. But like I say, it is an excellent gun. You'll never find anyone that won't say it's an excellent gun. You will find some people trying to play up the whole fact that it can fire if being dropped, but that's really no surprise to anyone that understands guns and understands physics, because it's something we would expect. Maybe. But all that aside, like I say, I didn't make it. So I would tell you, yeah, this is a big fail on SIG's part, but it's not, because they're going to fix it. So like I said, I'm not going to slam the gun now, because, like I said, they're fixing it. I would think it would be unacceptable for SIG not to fix that problem, because it is something easily fixed just by simply doing something they should have done already. And I'm assuming that's what they're going to do on Monday. We will have to wait and see. But until then, I'm going to reserve judgment and say, if that's what they're going to do, they're just going to give you better triggers. I already put better triggers in mine. So I think most people should just be happy, because I think once you get the better trigger, you'll like it a lot better. I'm hoping they'll do a flat face trigger like this one, or like the one that's in the X5, which I'm betting they'll just give you the X5 triggers. And like I said, I hope that's what they do. So for now, I'm going to say, don't worry about it. If you carry a SIG P320, keep carrying it. The PIG 320 will do you well. Your chances of dropping it in that contrived way that they have to drop it to get it to fire is almost non-existent. Even that police department that quit using them after they saw they could fire like that, once they understand the reality of the situation, once that it was explained to them, they went back to using it, because they realized, oh yeah, we're worried about nothing. So don't worry about it. But when they offer that free trigger, if that's what they do, definitely get one, because it's better. So the lesson is here, I guess, pay attention. If you do see there's a problem with the gun, try to get it fixed. Put a little pressure on the manufacturer, because they'll fix it. Even if it's something like this you shouldn't worry about, if you can get something better, and that something better actually solves the problem, I think they should solve the problem and give you something better. But I think the real moral here is just the lesson we should all learn, that this is a perfect example of why hammer-fired guns are just so much more superior to striker-fired.